Hello, my name is Mariana Salem, aka Mary. I'm here with my co-host, Duriadan Hawk, aka Dale.
Hello.
We are two writers who love movies, television, and books, especially when they're gay, and welcome to GayV Club, where we look at LGBT media that we like, that we don't like, and how we relate to them as gay people of colour.
Happy Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day. Hi, everybody.
I hope you're choosing to spend your Tuesday listening to us instead of participating
instead of participating in this
in a heteronormative holiday that's only just started to be inclusive so they can make money off us. Sorry.
Well, it was always capitalistic even for the heteros, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I don't want people to tell me like, oh, you know what proves you're in love? Buying shit. It's like, no.
Yeah.
You know, it's giving that scene in 50 Shades of Grey when she's like, how do I know I'm not like those other girls? And he's like, Anna, I took you up in my helicopter. You know, it's like, what does that have to do with anything? Like, Christian, Mr. Grey, please, like, arrange your priorities. Anyway, my exclusive critique.
I hope you have fun today anyway.
Yeah. Look, if you use it to do something nice... I hope you're not
listening to it today. I hope you're listening to it on I don't know, a Thursday or something.
A Thursday.
We're a good
just
Thursday
a random
podcast,
Thursday.
actually. Yeah. Anyways.
Anyway, hello everybody. Thank you for tuning in. Remember, if you like us, if you like GayV Club and what we do, please rec us to your friends, family, crush, significant other. Leave a nice review wherever you listen to podcasts. You can keep up to date with us on our personal socials, but also on Twitter and Instagram at GayV_club. And we do have a Tumblr now, GayV Club Podcast, for our Tumblrinas in the audience, which we have a feeling is probably a lot of our audience. And we have a lot of juicy bonus episodes on our Patreon, patreon.com/GayVclub, if you are so inclined.
Thank you.
Today, we are talking about Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen and its recent adaptation, Fire Island, which is written by Joel Kim Booster and directed by Andrew Ahn, as well as other queer workings of the story. So, Dale, what is Pride and Prejudice? What is it about?
Pride and Prejudice, it's a romantic novel by Jane Austen from 1813, and it follows the protagonist, Elizabeth Bennet, and her 4 sisters as they meet the new boys in town, basically, Bingley, Darcy, and Wickham. And so with the exception of the younger sisters, Kitty and Mary, each sister ends the novel happily betrothed, but it's not that simple. So the novel, it's a social commentary on like the sorts of intersecting like classism and sexism of Austen's time, with much of the novel's conflict revolving around whether Jane and Lizzie are good enough for their considerably richer romantic interests, and with each party holding preconceived notions relating their differences. Yeah, it's about people with a lot of pride and a lot of prejudice. And, you know, like at the center of the story, you have the romance between the protagonist, Elizabeth Bennet, aka Lizzie, and Mr. Darcy, aka Fitzy, my boy. Mary, I think we said this on our Shakespeare episode. Mary, you said that they're like Beatrice and Benedict from Much Ado About Nothing are like the blueprint of them.
Oh, yes. We could never prove this, like, because we can't speak to Jane Austen. We can't ask her. But I and many other people, it's not just my crackpot theory, there have been like whole academic articles written about like the similarities between Shakespeare's works and Austen's works, and a lot of people have pretty much said that she very likely read all of Shakespeare, and one of the big things that people point to is like the similarities between Beatrice and Benedict,
where the plot is like supposedly about their friends / relatives, them trying to get a romance between their friends to work, but
yes,
you know, it's about them.
It's about them. It's about them.
It's about them.
I talk about Much Ado a lot in relation to Benedict and Beatrice because I love them. But, you know, a huge part of the plot of Much Ado About Nothing is actually about the double standards with which men approach marriage and women. And, like, the whole reason that Benedict and Beatrice, like, don't actually want to get married at the start of the play is because, you know, it's not for them, because they see, like, you know, Benedict sees it as this, you know, failing institution, and how, you know, all his mates are like getting married and like becoming shells of their former selves. And Beatrice like doesn't want to get married because, you know, she doesn't want to be tied down to a man, basically. Like, even she in that time like observes that, you know, it's just when women get married, it's like very unfair on them. Much Ado and Pride and Prejudice share a lot of the same themes, a lot of the same plot beats. And, you know, I think, you know, in terms of like why Benedict and Beatrice like allegedly don't like each other, is a lot of the same reasons that Darcy and Elizabeth cite for allegedly not liking each other.
People talk about Pride and Prejudice as if it's like an enemies to lovers story, and it's not. I think it's really reductive to say that. Like, people act like they're mean to each other, but really
it's verbal
the
jousting.
whole thing. No, it's not even verbal jousting in Pride and Prejudice. Like, Beatrice and Benedict, definitely. But, like, in Pride and Prejudice, Darcy says, like, one mean thing about Elizabeth when he thinks she can't hear him. And then she does hear him, and then she reads him. And then literally, like, every single time you hear from Darcy's POV throughout the novel, he's talking about how much he's in love with her.
Yeah.
Like, there's no angst really to it.
Yeah,
other than, oh no, your family is so embarrassing.
He's not fighting it. People forget the element of prejudice that's there is like sort of, he doesn't even realize he has it in a weird way. Like, because that's why that scene where he proposes to her by telling her like how bad her family is kind of funny, because it's like he doesn't realize that's what he's saying. And that's why, you know, like Elizabeth is sort of like, are you for real right now? Like, is this like...
It's not an I can fix him story.
No.
It's a, if he knows what's good for him, he better fix himself story.
Yeah. They don't instantly hate each other, you know. She just
it's not a hatred.
She just thinks he's a bit, you know, pompous, a bit up himself, but that's not hatred. I feel like if Elizabeth truly hated somebody, but I don't think Elizabeth would allow Jane, her sister, to marry someone who was so close to someone she genuinely hated. You know, look at how she reacts to poor Lydia.
Yeah, because that's like the number one red flag. If someone's really nice, but their friend sucks, and it's like unfathomable as to why they're friends with, it's because they suck too.
Literally. So, as you say, Dale, like, when you actually read the novel, like, after he says the mean thing, he does everything he can to try and, like, sort of take that back. He just doesn't really know how to do that. Like, he's just, like, socially awkward and has no idea how to actually be like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that.
Sorry, are you mad at me?
Are you mad at me?
Okay, so yeah, Fire Island, moving on, is a modern adaptation of Pride and Prejudice, and it's about a family, like a logical family as opposed to biological, a logical family of gay men on holiday at the popular gay tourist hotspot, Fire Island. And how can you make Pride and Prejudice if it's just with this demographic of people? Let's find out. But yeah, just before we get into Fire Island, let's ask the question, why do the gays love Pride and Prejudice? We're going to start with why we personally love Pride and Prejudice.
The gays in question we'll start off with is us.
Yeah.
Well, I love Pride and Prejudice because I love rom-coms, and it and Much Ado About Nothing are basically like, it's one of the blueprints. I don't want to lie and like sort of retrofit my thoughts and say that I've always been a fan or I've always thought it was gay, because I never really used to think about being gay in relation to it, and nor did I know that there were like queer readings and queer interpretations of it. But you know, as a gay person, I do enjoy Pride and Prejudice. My first exposure to Pride and Prejudice, like many people, was for the 2005 movie, which I actually didn't like the first time I saw it because I was 13 and I just didn't get it. But in my first year of uni, I read Emma for a uni course about adaptations, and I loved it. And it sort of spurred me to revisit Pride and Prejudice. And to this day, you know, not to brag, but one of my huge footprints on the internet, one of my most popular posts on tumblr.com is this very like come to Jesus moment of realizing Jane Austen was good. I didn't even actually tag that post until afterwards, but when it blew up, it was basically just a post where I was like, I'm sorry I didn't get Jane Austen in high school. I've just realised she's heaps feminist, eh? Basically, I was like, she never wrote a scene without a woman present, and I think that's pretty cool, and I basically apologise for being an auntie in high school. But in my defence, I was raised by a Twilight mum, and so I really just didn't like romance because I was constantly, going home to mum being like, oh, shall we listen to the Twilight audiobook again? And I'd be like, no!
For me, I was first introduced to the story with the 2004 Gurinder Chadha movie Bride and Prejudice.
Nice.
Which is, Pride and Prejudice, but it's set in India, starring Aishwarya Rai as the Lizzie character. I forget which white guy plays Darcy in this. But yeah, so Pride and Prejudice is, my first foray into the story. I didn't know when I watched it, because I don't know, I would have been like 8 or something. I didn't know that it was an adaptation of Pride and Prejudice, because, it's a very brown story, actually. And so, again, like, I don't really want to retrofit my thoughts into being like, oh, I always thought of this as gay. But I think, like, the story is like a satire on heteronormativity. That's something that I definitely connected to, like, to see, like, a character, like Aishwarya Rai, Lizzie's character, not wanting to be married and, like, being adamant against this and critical of it as well, is something that I just really felt as a young brown, not girl.
As a young brown girl, in brackets, not.
Not a girl.
Yeah.
It really captured that frustrations for me, which is important. Like, it's on par with Bend It Like Beckham, It's like ethnic parents will show you Bend It Like Beckham and Pride and Prejudice when you're a kid and then turn around and be like, why are you gay? Later on, when I got into, like, my real Keira Knightley phase, I watched the 2005 movie and it's really, really lovely. That's it, really. So moving on, why do we think the gays like Pride and Prejudice? So even though, it's technically about straight people, there are like things about it that, it's a bit queer. Well, I mean, it's queer in the way that it is a satire on heteronormativity and challenging / commentating on all that. I feel like one of the reasons that a lot of queer people like Pride and Prejudice, Jane Austen, and just like period dramas in general is because of the restraint caused by social expectations, but also because it ends in a sort of triumphant romantic defiance of those social expectations. And, like the thing about period dramas and being in a time where everything has to be repressed and unexpressed, like this is something that gay people can definitely relate to, even in a modern period of time. So it's really nice to see, like, by the end, Lizzie and Darcy, they overcome, like, both their internalized bullshit and also the social constraints that have been imposed on them to be together on their own terms, and that's pretty gay, if you ask me.
It's so gay. Like, they're like the gayest straight people that you've ever seen.
Yeah, so it is very much a satire on heteronormativity, like the first sentence that says, "It is a truth universally acknowledged that every man with good fortune is in want of a wife," or something like that. It's dripping with sarcasm there. It's very clearly, from the beginning, positions itself as a satire against these things. So moving on, Fire Island, as we said, is an adaptation of Pride and Prejudice that takes place on Fire Island, which is an island off New York. It's a very popular queer holiday destination. So we have Noah, he's played by Joel Kim Booster as our Lizzie. His friend Howie, played by Bowen Yang, is like a hybrid of Jane and Charlotte. Their 3 other friends, Keegan, Luke, and Max, are clearly versions of Kitty, Lydia, and Mary. And Margaret Cho plays their lesbian surrogate mother figure, Mrs. Bennet. We've also got our boy, Fitzwilliam Darcy, Fitzy. He's Will, played by Conrad Ricamora, and Charles Bingley is Charlie, played by James Scully. So yeah, it's a Pride and Prejudice adaptation that looks at how social dynamics within the gay community are shaped by race, class, gender nonconformity, and body image, specifically interrogating like the cruelty of superficial hookup culture, no fats, no femmes, no Asians, by making it about a family of fats, femmes, and Asians.
I think personally, Fire Island is the best modern transposition of Pride and Prejudice, or like best modern adaptation of Pride and Prejudice, let alone like gay version, since Pride and Prejudice. There are things to critique Fire Island as its own story, but as an adaptation, I think it works very well. At least my favourite, if not the best. I think that one of the strongest points in the film is the character of Howie, who's played by Bowen Yang. I think he's interesting because he's an amalgamation of Jane and Charlotte Lucas, So he serves as Noah's main confidant of the film by like combining Lizzie's two biggest confidants into like one person, which I think is like quite genius in its own way.
Mm-hmm.
Howie falls pretty hard, because he is Jane, falls pretty hard and fast for Charlie/Bingley.
He's a very romantic.
He is.
He's a romantic.
He is. I relate.
There's even like that reference at the start of the movie where they're on the roof and he's just like, I want like a boombox outside my window or a confession in a gazebo. I see what you're doing.
No, I loved him. I found that, for me personally, like a very relatable thing about him for me.
It's really cool that this movie uses the hypersexual setting, I'd say. Yeah, like the hypersexual setting to look at what it's like just to be a gay person that's not, where it's not really their thing.
Yeah, and I think it's good that it does that without condemning people who, enjoy lots of sex and hookups and stuff like that. I mean, I can't really speak to that because that's not something I do, but like I didn't feel like it was trying to say that way of doing things is bad. It was just trying to say like it just doesn't suit Howie and who he is, which is, yeah, that's just nice. I mean, the bar is on the floor, but it's very nice. But obviously, yeah, Howie falls very hard and fast for Charlie. But he also has like sort of Charlotte's classic sort of despairing moment, where he sort of says to Noah, you don't get what it's like to not get to be picky moment that Charlotte has. And Charlotte has this moment in the novel because she's talking to Lizzie about how at her stage in her life she just doesn't have the luxury of waiting for a partner.
27 years old.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that part of the film is memed a lot, like for its comedy, and I've done that too. I'm not making myself an exception to that.
Every
but
27-year-old posts on their birthday. Like
yeah,
on
exactly.
Story.
I mean, that's fun. It's like
can't wait for it to be me
at
the end of the year.
Hell yeah, bro! Get it ready. Get it ready to go. But no, I think it's like interesting because that's actually, I would argue, like one of the saddest parts of Pride and Prejudice is that moment, because it's the moment where like you sort of look at the powerlessness that women like Charlotte had during the time. Because Charlotte represents women who were forced into loveless marriages because they didn't have the choice or the privilege to do otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
And this is translated through Howie's experiences as a gay Asian man. Like, he does settle to have sex with some white guy who has an Asian fetish until Noah pulls him out of it, thank goodness. But this is a true experience of many, like, Gaysians and gays of colour, people of colour in general, really, like, no matter the sexuality. Just for me, Howie was the strongest part, in my opinion. I mean, I will talk a little bit later about how Noah sort of fits into everything, but yeah, what are your thoughts, Dao?
I watched this for the first time on my own, and the movie opens and it's like this beautiful sunlit shot, and the first thing you say is, oh, this was shot on film. And then you have Joel Kim Booster, Noah's voiceover, quoting the first line from Pride and Prejudice, the truth universally acknowledged. And then he proceeds to say, no offense to my girl Jane, but that's some heteronormative bullshit. And because of that comment, because I was watching it on my own, I was just immediately like, this guy doesn't get it. I was like, that line is satirical. This guy doesn't get it. No way.
He doesn't understand.
And so like, and so I was very, on the first time I watched it, I was very closed off to it as an adaptation and was just kind of looking at it at its own thing. And I was quite cynical about it because, I'm not a gay Asian man, but I am a Gaysian and I have many Gaysian friends. And the topics that this movie touches on are like really important to me and to people who are close to me. So I was more like focusing on it like that. I could definitely see like the parallels, like, oh, this is meant to be Bingley romance and this is meant to be the Lizzie Darcy romance. But other than that, like I was pretty closed off to it. But then the second time that I watched it with Mary, and Mary has a very infectious vibe when you're watching things with them. And because Mary enjoyed it so much and was looking at it as an adaptation, that kind of opened my mind to it a bit more. I
can't really look at it as I don't feel like I have what is a typical or what is a commonly referred to as a Gaysian experience. So I feel engaging with it as an adaptation was like kind of the main way I could engage with it. But yeah.
Yeah, gay rab.
That's me.
So yeah, obviously, like, the second time watching it with Mary, I realized, oh no, wait, he does know, he does get it. you know, not everyone that turns on this film is going to be familiar with Pride and Prejudice, and so I feel like there are like things to critique about this film that are easier to pick up when you're not looking at it as an adaptation, because yeah, there are just like some moments, even though Fire Island is very much made for gay people that love Pride and Prejudice, which is a very specific demographic, and I think it hits the nail on the head. Yeah, it reaches us well.
I think, we here at GayV Club, we love specificity. And I think, as you said there, this film is not just for gays in general or Gaysians. I mean, it is for both of those people, but it's specifically for those people who also love Pride and Prejudice.
Yeah.
And love watching Pride and Prejudice and love talking about Pride and Prejudice. We, as members of that group of people, or at least I won't speak for anyone else but myself, but I, as a member of those group of people,
of
I
the
really
Gay
love
Pride and
this
Prejudice
movie.
Alliance
Yeah.
fandom. Yes.
And I understand that not everyone can get into it. I find it very interesting that my friends who are not Pride and Prejudice people, like at all, I believe it or not, I have friends who have not even seen the 2005 movie. I have a very diverse friend group. I believe in diversity. And they said to me when I told them to watch the film, and a lot of those friends are gay, they would be like, yeah, it's fine. So I do think there is a critique to be made about how this film maybe is hard to engage with if you're not familiar with Pride and Prejudice, but I also think it's okay if Andrew Wan and co were like, we're not making a film for those people, we're making a film for the people who do love Pride and Prejudice and who do want to see this kind of film. And I respect that.
Yeah, I think Fire Island is especially like strongest when you look at it as an adaptation, because there are moments in the film where the adaptation gets in the way, I think, of what Joel Kim Booster's unique points about the treatment of fats, femmes, and Asians in the gay community are. Some of the prime examples of this that, I picked up on my first viewing when I was in hater mode. Like, for instance, we know Mary Bennett in Pride and Prejudice. Like, she's the weirdo. She's the weird girl. She's in the background. She's the background character.
Have you ever seen her without
things.
that book?
Without that piano? That's weird. And like, so we know this about Mary, and like her equivalent in Fire Island is Max. So like when you look at the movie as an adaptation, you can see Max being, he's being a total Mary. But when you're looking at Fire Island as an unrelated piece about inter-community marginalization, you see Max instead as like the one character in the movie who is black and fat, and he's doing absolutely nothing. Like, he's basically ornamental.
The black friend as comic relief is like a very, unfortunately, common and racist trope. And I think, unfortunately, like Max, there are like quite a few moments in this film where you're meant to laugh at Max specifically, and the moment that I'm thinking of, as funny as it is if it existed in a vacuum, is where like, Max is like, I mean, they're all high, in fairness, they're all like very high, but Max is also extremely high, and he sees himself, his reflection, and he's like, oh my god, like, I'm beautiful, I'm so gorgeous. And first of all, he's totally correct, he is, but like, the reason that that's meant to be funny is you're meant to sort of think he's so silly for saying that.
He's high as a kite.
Yeah, he's crazy, he's thinking he's beautiful, and it's like, I don't know, I think there's something deeper to that where you could interrogate, well, like, why is it supposed to be funny that, in his pure uninhibited state, this like fat black character is like, I'm pretty.
Yeah.
Like, why can't he be? Like, why is that a joke? Max, personally for me, was the other character I related to most in this movie. Like, all his friends are partying, he's like, I'm sitting here with my book, thank you very much. That's me also at the party. So I think it's a little bit disappointing, like you said, Dave, like when they're trying to advocate for all these issues, and yet Max is treated that way.
And then, another major instance of this is with Howie's arc. So I totally agree. Like, I love the way that Howie is. I love Bowen Yang in this movie. I was very surprised by how much I enjoyed. I think he should get good roles like this again, because there's a really great like emotional brevity to it, like his Jane/Charlotte characterization and like the way that it looks at this. Even though I love like what they use this character to say When you look at the movie as an adaptation, like you see Howie's romance with Charlie as like the equivalent of Jane and Bingley's romance, obviously, but like as a unique story trying to comment on, you know, the emotional challenges of being Asian and poor and unconventionally attractive and not, you know, 0% body fat. Like, we see Howie's arc instead fulfilled by obtaining the validation of a guy who is, you know, white, rich, fit, deep-voiced, very conventionally masculine. And so that's a little bit of a letdown given Howie's internal struggle. As we said, Fire Island was definitely made for, like, a very specific audience who are going to look at it as an adaptation. And, like, you know, being part of that specific audience, the contradictions of the movie don't really break the movie for me personally, but I do understand, like, why it would for some people.
I also think in a lot of ways contradictions happen a lot in Austen.
Mm-hmm.
I can't really criticize. I mean, I can obviously because we just did, but I think it's. I mean, I know when I was a teenager, one of the reasons I didn't like Austen was because I'd be like, why do all these characters not want to get married, and then they end up getting married at the end? It sucks, you know. Like,
one thing I like about Fire Island is it is kind of a remedy for that.
Yeah,
the ending with Noah and Will is like a answer to that.
Yeah, which is really lovely. But I still think, you know, I agree with you with Howie on him ending up with a white guy, even though his whole thing is about, like, he can't love himself because of, like, the whiteness of the community and things, yeah.
It could have been a stronger movie, a stronger story, in my opinion, if, like, either, like, you know, give Max more active role in the plot, like, even just, like, slightly more active, like, just let him say something, let him be there, or, like, you know, if Charlie himself was a person of color, who you know, like Will, because like Will's already in that group and he feels awkward like within the friend group as a person of color, so maybe, you know, I feel like the thing about Bingley in every adaptation, like, even though I love him, like, he's a himbo and he's adorable and, you know, whatever, like, he's such a he's like the biggest victim of peer pressure that I've ever seen. You know, only like on the level of Troy Bolton here. Like, he's
this is
just
true. This is very true.
He is so like easily just swayed. He doesn't really think for his own. And I would have liked, so maybe like in this version, like you could have given him like a tiny bit of maybe some character development, just something about him that makes him different, you know, and like how he might like be able to bond about like things that, you know, that of like things that make them different, like within their group. If they had made Charlie like different in some way, you know,
I think like, that would have been really nice.
That would have been really nice.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's not a terrible movie. Like, Fire Island isn't a terrible movie because it doesn't have these things, but I think it could be just much better, and I think it could also reach more people other than, you know, proud and prejudiced gays, you know.
Yeah. I feel like there may be the motivation there was to have Will be like the black sheep of the group, you know, like to be the sort of odd one out of his white rich friend group. But I think you're right. Like, I think it would have spoken to the strength of their friendship, because I don't think you ever not get that sense.
Yeah.
That like Fitzy and Charles aren't the best of friends.
Yeah.
It wouldn't have hurt the story in any way.
Yeah.
I agree with you. I think that's a good fix. You should ring Andrew on that right now and be like...
Ring Joel Kim Booster and just... Yep. Like, something that is already so diverse, like, you know, could just have, like, a few more tweaks to it. I guess, actually, like, Charlie does bond with Howie over the fact that they have the same kind of attitudes towards sex and relationships, but that wasn't enough, you know?
Also because we don't see a lot of that bonding. Like, no. It just sort of happens to the side.
They were doing a puzzle.
Yeah.
I love that scene.
They were so real for the puzzle scene, but also, like, Howie is such a real character to me. Like, when he was flirting with Charlie by telling him about his favourite SNL sketch, I felt so seen. I literally do this with people. Like, this is actually, like, a love language of mine. I just love describing, like, movies that I've seen to people.
Do you have any particular SNL sketches that you like to describe to people, or no?
Oh, I love describing, if they haven't seen it, the Papyrus sketch to people.
Yeah, Ryan Gosling Papyrus sketch, yes.
And I also, just all the classics, man. Like, I love describing, like, Liza Minnelli tries to turn on a lamp, you know, like all of them. It's just very fun.
I love the Rami Malek mattress shopping one so much.
Oh, I've described to so many people the Marriage Story
brutal marriage movie
trailer. Anyway, another thing I loved about this movie is how it references and builds on other adaptations. There's a scene in the rain with Will and Noah, which is a very obvious nod to 2005. I think when we were watching this together, Day, you were like, I love how since like 2005 Pride and Prejudice, like whenever it starts raining in a Pride and Prejudice adaptation, you know what's coming. It's like,
oh no, was that a crack of thunder?
There's the beach bonding montage that Noah and Will do, which is like a lovely nod to Bride and Prejudice.
Yes.
And then there's the sex tape scandal, which was done in the web series The Lizzie Bennet Diaries. Back in, I think the Lizzie Bennet Diaries ran from like 2011 to 2012. And it was just a like web series of like, what if Pride and Prejudice but done in vlogs? Which was a very popular idea that was done at the time. And you know what? I honestly still think it's an idea that slaps. I don't care. The intertextual sort of love this movie has for the art of adapting Pride and Prejudice specifically is so palpable. And I love that. I love it so much because there's so many adaptations that just sort of lampshade previous versions to critique them or to just be like, hey, remember this other thing that was good? But this one doesn't. Like, it uses it to enhance like its own version of this story, which is lovely. There's just so much love in this movie for the source material, like for Pride and Prejudice and how it's kept alive. Like, this is a weird thing to say, but I think with a lot of adaptations these days, there's a lot of like trying to outsmart the source material while you're building an entire thing like on the source material. It's not even like when people go, oh hey, we can fix this, you know, like with or hey, we can improve on this, which is like I guess what Interview with a Vampire and other things have done. It's more like I'm thinking of adaptations that really just don't seem to have any respect for the material that they're adapting, and I'm specifically talking about like whenever Disney adapts anything. We have sort of mentioned this, but I think this film is so beautiful, like on a visual level. I love the natural lighting in this movie. It's so stunning. It's shot on film. There's so many golden hour and sundown sequences that are just so pretty. And I love that all the music in it, like the pop music for the soundtrack is by queer artists. I also am not a person who knew a lot about Fire Island as a place, because I am Australian. But I appreciated this movie, like, uses Fire Island and its sort of insular history as the setting, because I think a huge key to any Pride and Prejudice adaptation is that it has to be set in a very small community, because it really is about, like, the insular nature of, like, social expectations in a very tight community. And I think like a reason that a lot of Pride and Prejudice adaptations like kind of fall flat is because they try to make it like a very general story, and it's not. Like, it's a very specific story. So you know, we always talk on here at GayV Club, you know, there is universality in the specific, and I think Pride and Prejudice is like a great story because it has that. It has like the universality in this very specific experience. And I also love as well, just as someone who didn't know a lot about Fire Island as a place, that it has lots of lovely, like, teachable moments about the history of Fire Island as a place that I found very interesting. And so this movie is also engaging with the history of the setting, like, as something that informs the issues that it's going to put forward in the film, which I think is just great, you know? I learned things while I watched this movie as well, which is just wonderful.
I watched this movie, and I think like 2 days later I watched that Steve Buscemi movie Parting Glances, and I was like, hey, I know this place.
Oh!
Yeah, and I think as
set
well,
on
like
Fire
with
Island as well?
Well, it's not set on, but there's a scene like at the end they go to Fire Island, and I was like, I know this beach.
I just want to say though, as someone who has grown up like in a beach town / city with like very beautiful beaches, I think that the beaches on this island are the most festy looking beaches I've ever seen in my life. And I was literally like, you know, when they were sort of frolicking on the sand, I was like, don't get in the water. Like don't. That like just looks so gross. Like, I would not, you could not pay me to get in that water.
Yeah.
Even the sand looks kind of gross. Like, this is just my bias as someone who has grown up like around like very beautiful
Listen, like
beaches.
if you live on like coastal Australia, like we just have that privilege of thinking every other beach in the world is ugly. Even if you don't particularly like the beach in Australia, it's better than everywhere else. With what you were saying about Fire Island being like a very insular community, something that, you know, I feel like this is just homophobic. Like, whenever a movie, like a great movie centering on gay men comes out, there's like this weird subset of people who are like, this doesn't pass the Bechdel test, so it's not feminist. And I'm like, I feel like you can't, like, there should be enough room for stories about gay men. Like, this is not the same. You can't judge it in this way. I love that Alison Bechdel was like, listen, like, there's a scene where two gay men discuss Alice Munro in this, so you know it does get my stamp of approval. So yeah, it's got a Bechdel pass. And like the thing is, like, it shouldn't need one
No.
because there should be spaces for stories, like for hyper specific stories like this. I don't like when like the Bechdel test is being used to derail stories about like people of other marginalized groups, you know.
I don't think that the Bechdel test was ever designed to like measure the morality or the quality of a film.
Yeah, no, it never was.
It was never intended that way, and the fact that so many people use it that way is extremely bizarre to me.
The Bechdel-Wallace test. It started out as like a comic strip joke.
It was a joke.
Like, you know, it was a joke. Like, hey, if I can't imagine these characters as lesbians, then it fails the test, you know? If I
It was designed to sort of just point out
it was
that
weird
a lot
when
of
like
films...
straight people caught onto it. It's not movies about gay men that's hurting women, you know?
Yeah.
It's just really homophobic to look at it that way.
It is like a very huge disservice to these films that are giving voices to people that typically don't have them.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of, though, there have been critiques about, you know, the representations of lesbians in this movie. And, yeah, like, there's only Margaret Cho, which is a bit sad. Like, she's the Mrs. Bennet character, but where's the dad? Where's the lesbian dad?
Yeah, where's the dad?
Like, who thinks it's all silly. Like, I wouldn't say that it costs $0 because, you know, like, movies cost money, but I would have liked to see, like, a lesbian Mr. Bennet who's just laughing at it all, you know? Yeah, your boy Wickham.
Yeah, you know I had to do it to him. In brackets, talk about Wickham. Wickham is like... When I wrote this in the notes, like, House of the Dragon had just finished, so I was like, he's my Daemon Targaryen. I fully believe you can get away with changing a lot about Pride and Prejudice, but Wickham is like an essential cog of Pride and Prejudice. Is he the good guy? No, but he's the guy that makes shit happen. Like, nothing really advances in Pride and Prejudice without Wickham coming in and causing and shit stirring. And here, that role is filled by a character called Dex, who's played by Zane Phillips, who has the best intro of any character ever.
They're in the grocery store and they're trying to get like what they need as cheap as possible. So Noah's there like crouching on the ground smashing cans to see if he can get a discount, and Dex catches him and then
helps him smash the can.
And then helps him smash it, and he passes over and he's just like, it's okay, I'm poor too. And it's just I yelled at that, but it's the best Lizzie Wickham meet cute moment.
Just excellent. And in the movie, he's a white gay who like victimizes himself to victimize others. The OnlyFans thing that this film does, where Dex preys on, you know, gays who are drunk and like uploads videos of them having sex to his OnlyFans without their consent. I thought that was like so specifically evil, you know, for this modern context, but also like feeds into the same kind of evil that Wickham commits like in the original novel, you know, that
he frames Darcy's dislike for him as for him being a sex worker when actually it's because he's essentially a rapist.
Yeah, classic Wickham, like only telling half of the story and the other half is lies.
Yeah.
Actually, both halves are lies, really. I absolutely love that Will and Noah like confront Dex together. I think that's like a galaxy brain like sexy decision. I just love that scene so much when Noah finds out what Dex did to his friend.
He's like, I'm gonna kill him.
He's like, I'm gonna kill, like, and then he tells Will what's happened, and Will's like, I'm gonna kill him, and he's like, hey, I'm gonna go and kill him. Wait, no, don't go without me.
The thing about the original Pride and Prejudice is it all kind of happens in absentia off screen. Where you find out that Darcy's doing this whole thing, and you know, good for him. He's king for that. But also, like, you know, I would love to have seen Lizzie beat the shit out of Wickham. Like, I think she should be allowed that. And I like that Noah basically.
People are so lucky. Like, I didn't see this in the cinema because I would have been escorted out for like yelling and cheering. Because I just love the team up. I just love the mutual support. It's like literally about like presenting the idea that Noah and Will like they share the same values, and the same stubbornness, and like they're equals. I do not know like how after this point in the movie, it's like a full 12 minutes before they make out. It's just so like scream. Like how could you? Wow. Yeah, I really like that they brought that part to the actual confrontation, like, to the screen. Because when you read the part where Lizzie meets Wickham after he's been hurriedly married off to Lydia, she is just fuming, like, internally. But externally, she has to be like, ooh, welcome to the family. But she's giving him, like, you know, bitch, I'll kill you eyes, you know, kind of thing. And I
Kill
just
Bill
love
Sirens.
that. Yeah, Kill Bill Sirens. But I just love how, you know, we kind of don't have to do that in this because it's, you know, it's a bit more modern and, you know, we don't have to, like, they can literally be like, bitch, I'll kill you on screen, which is great. This was, I just really love this, because Emma is my favorite Jane Austen. Like, Emma is, like, the greatest villain and greatest protagonist of all time. She's so funny. And Noah is a really interesting, like, Lizzie variant because I feel like he borrows a lot from Emma, because he's meddling in people's lives and he gets called out for it. Like, there's a little bit of like Emma and Harriet in Noah and Howie as well. Just personally, as an Emma enjoyer, I enjoyed like just having a little bit, you know, of what if Emma was the protagonist of Pride and Prejudice, you know, what chaos would ensue. And now we have the answer to that question, which is just really fun.
And Conrad Rickamora as Will. First of all, it's just so nice to see him in something that's not How to Get Away with Murder, in something that's actually good. And he's brilliant in this movie. Like, he's so, like, dorky. I love, like, his little, like, the tight smile that he does throughout the movie, where he's just, like, trying so hard not to laugh, and it's so cute. I love him so much.
He's trying to be
that.
So stoic. He's trying to be, like, so, like, I'm a serious man.
Yeah.
I love the little running ice cream cone gag in the movie. I would give it 5 stars on that alone, of like Noah being like, oh, I didn't take you for a little ice cream cone guy, and then he just like throws it away. I love them.
He's so good. He's so cringe.
My favorite little like behind the scenes, like I read an interview with Joachim Booster where he was saying how the reason Conrad was cast as Will is because like in the chemistry tests that they were doing with the various actors they had in mind, Conrad was the only one that actually like made Joachim Booster like really flustered. And they were like, yeah, that's the kind of thing we want. Like we want him to be like flustered and angry. Like like flustered and angry and like kind of horny all at the same time. And so it's really good. Like I love that scene where he says that, where he's like, why am I like horny and angry like at the same time?
Yeah, amazing. And I like as well with them, and you know, like the thing about the way that Pride and Prejudice ended is obviously like Lizzie and Darcy get married too. And I like, you know, if you are like doing a queer reading of it, there is a little element of betrayal there in Lizzie going back. But really, like, I mean, it's not, but, you know, it's nice. It would be nicer if it was possible to have the kind of ending that they have in Fire Island that's really nice about them talking about, like, the kind of relationships that they want. They're arguing first about, like, you know, whether they want to be, well, I mean, Lizzie, Noah, they still don't want to be constrained by any kind of heteronormative ideals of romance, and
for them it's just enough for them to be together.
Yeah, and it's enough for them to be together in that moment. And I love when Will looks over to that older gay couple and they're just dancing together as the sun goes down, and he's like, I want that. And it's so
huge
pleading emoji
eyes. Yeah.
how did we like express ourselves before pleading emoji?
The pleading eye emoji? I don't
existed.
know.
I don't know.
I don't remember.
I don't even know.
It means so much to me. It's like a brother to me.
Yeah, it's like integral to the human language now. We'd also just like to talk about some other gay adaptations of Pride and Prejudice if you're interested.
Yeah.
So
we're not pretending to be across every queer version of the story. Obviously, if you have one, if you know of one that we don't mention, like, tell us. We'd love to hear about it. Probably the one I was most familiar with prior to Fire Island was a very silly show called Lost in Austin, which, you know, elements of this show are a bit hate crimey, I'm not gonna lie. Lost in Austin is a BBC Pride and Prejudice handjob that was made by ITV, where a 26-year-old woman who's obsessed with Pride and Prejudice crawls through a hole in her bathroom wall and ends up in the world of the book, like Narnia style. Like, so she doesn't actually time travel. She's just, like, in the world of Pride and Prejudice.
Yeah.
Which is
and
a
this
bit
was made in
bizarre.
2007, by the way.
Yeah. And so it's not a gay reimagining, but it does have, like, several scenes that basically heavily subtext Wickham as gay, as well as having a scene where Caroline hits on the protagonist.
So basically, like, this what's her name? Well, I don't know. She swaps places with Lizzie in this, and she is fighting for her life to keep the story. Like, at the beginning of this story, she's fighting for her life to keep the story.
She's fighting for that canon,
like,
baby. She's
canon.
like, I will die to
but,
keep
you know,
this
it
canon.
doesn't work because, you know, everyone, like, starts to fall in love with her. And first it's Bingley that's really into her, and she brushes him off by saying that she's a lesbian.
Oh, that's right, yep.
And then he tells Caroline or something, and then Caroline approaches her.
Propositions her, basically. And at the end of the series, the fun thing that's implied is that, like, you know, Wickham and Caroline sort of end up together as each other's beards, which I think is, like, kind of galaxy-brained. Like, if it wasn't, like, for the equivalent of making, like, Lord of the Rings without Sauron, you know? It's so I really don't think that this was genuinely an attempt to imagine a queer version of anything. Rather, Lost in Austin's, like, general goal as a piece of media was to completely subvert expectations of what, you know, being in Pride and Prejudice would look like. So, you know, is it fun to watch? Yes. Does it make any sense? Absolutely not. And my actual biggest criticism of Lost in Austin is that we don't get to see Lizzie living her best life in modern day London. And I just think that that's just not good enough, especially because Lizzie in this is played by Gemma Arterton. In researching for this episode, I also found a 2016 film called Before the Fall, which imagines Pride and Prejudice as a romance between two men in Virginia. Last year, there was a Spotify original podcast series called Gay Pride and Prejudice, written by queer writer Zachary Grady with an all-openly gay cast. It's set in 2015, when gay marriage was officially legalized nationwide in the United States, and it follows this character called Bennett's reunion with his friends in his hometown, which gets disrupted when Carlos Bingley, a famous pop star, arrives in town. I know. This was cute. I did listen to a few episodes, like, for this podcast. I have nothing else to say about it. You know, it's just literally, it's in the title. It's Gay Pride and Prejudice. There are, sadly, in my research at least, I couldn't find as many lesbian Pride and Prejudice adaptations as there are, like, ones about gay men. However, I did find that in March 2020... terrible time, by the way, that in March 2020 there was a play touring the UK called Pride and Prejudice, in brackets, sort of, by Isabel MacArthur, which reimagined Pride and Prejudice from Charlotte's point of view and makes her canonically a lesbian. Unfortunately, it was a play touring in March 2020, so you can imagine what happened there.
Rest in pieces.
Which is that the play stopped touring due to the pandemic. But those were the ones I could find in my research. But you've read a book, haven't you?
Yes, I have read a book.
You've read a book?
No, I haven't even read the whole book. Sorry, that's really sad. There's this book by Kate Christie called Gay Pride and Prejudice, which is a Lizzie Caroline romance. It's Pride and Prejudice, but it's reimagined. Well, it's not really reimagined. It's Pride and Prejudice if it was Lizzie and Caroline getting together. And Lizzie Caroline is my crack ship because obviously I think Caroline is such a lesbian and the way that she hates on Lizzie is so suspicious. Like, there's so much subtext there. Yeah, so it's written by Kate Christie. It's pretty much... like, for the most part, it's very, like, copy-paste of the original text. Like, there's pages and pages, so many points of the plot that are the exact same. Lizzie and Caroline aren't the only gay characters in it. The first chapter opens and you find out that Mr. Bennet is gay, which is so inspired, actually. Like, it's so real. I remember when I started reading this book and, like, I would be like, oh my god, Mr. Bennet is gay in this book. Oh my god, Bingley is gay in this book. And, you know, I'm reading this book called Gay Pride and Prejudice, but I'm surprised how many other gay characters there are. And something, like, really beautiful about this one is that it does start out with Lizzie and Charlotte in a secretly lesbian relationship. And it's so sad. Like, it made me cry so much because, you know, the plot still rolls out the exact same way. And I think, it's beautiful, but it's rough. there is a lot of gay subtext in between Lizzie and Charlotte anyway, and like Charlotte is, it speaks to how it must have been for a lot of lesbians in that period who have to settle for a heterosexual marriage because, what else are they going to do?
Literally nothing.
There's a really, really lovely scene as well where Lizzie's obviously upset by Charlotte's marriage to Mr. Collins, and Jane, her older sister, just talks to her about it, and it turns out that like Jane knew the whole time and just like really, and she like really loves her still like for it, and it's just very beautiful. It's just very nice like sibling allyship that's just makes me so sad. But it's such a beautiful scene.
It's also insane to make Charlotte's story sadder than it already was. You know what I mean? Like Charlotte already has like she is the tragedy of like Pride and Prejudice, really. To add that extra element to it, not only is she just forced into this marriage because otherwise she'd be destitute, she like can't even grow to love this man, like it's just going to be something like it's only ever going to be a source of like unhappiness for her, which is just wow, dude, why would you tell me that? It's so sad. Poor Charlotte. Poor gay Pride and Prejudice Charlotte. Anyway, concluding thoughts.
Well, this is your dot point. I don't know how much I agree.
All right.
This is your hill to die on.
My hill to die on. So my concluding thought dot point that I have here, dear listeners, is why do people, I'm not going to say you guys, because I'm going to assume that the people who listen to us have taste. So I'm just going to say, like, why do people hate the Persuasion 2022 movie? In my mind, Persuasion and Fire Island are like, they're holding hands, specifically my hands. Like, they're holding me up from falling into the abyss. Like, why don't you guys want to have fun? I love the Persuasion 2022 movie. I think, like Fire Island, Persuasion 2022, like, shows why a story like that is still very resonant, with the whole slightly modernizing of it with the turn to camera and like some of the jokes in it. I still think one of the greatest jokes in any movie of 2022 was in Persuasion, when she holds up the collection of freaking musical sheet music and she's like, I made a playlist. Why do you guys hate fun? Like, why do you guys... And I'm sorry, but it actually did improve on the source material. All you people who just want to prove that you read a book by saying that you think this movie is bad because it's not like the book, go read another book. Both Fire Island and Persuasion were great Jane Austen adaptations that we got in 2022. And next up, I want a bisexual Emma version of Emma, please. Yeah. I've said everything I really want to say about it, but I think Fire Island is like a beautiful adaptation because it really is made by people who not only love like Pride and Prejudice as a story, but love why it's resonant and also just love all the versions of it that have come before.
And also has its own thing that it wants to say.
Yeah. I would hope that more people who are approaching adapting classics or even just really popular books would approach adaptation in this way of like being very meaningful and very intentional and trying to say something new without necessarily...
Instead of just trying to resell you something unoriginal.
It was one of my favourite films of 2022 and I think it's a great film to watch on Valentine's Day.
Yeah, alright. Watch Fire Island.
Watch Fire Island. Don't buy Hogwarts Legacy. Thank you for coming to our
GayV
TED
Club
Talk.
out. All right. No, do we have anything else to say? Nah, not really.
No, not really.
Thank you for listening.
Hope you guys are having a nice February.
Yes. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.